Yeah, thanks. Can everybody hear me? Is that all good? Excellent. This is the second time I've been on a stage at the Barbican. The first time was as part of a contemporary dance troupe. So I promise I'm not going to break out any moves, but it's a privilege to be here. So thank you, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. When I was asked to come here by Frank and open this and give some opening remarks, I, of course, had a look at the website, the agenda, and there was this quote. I don't know if you saw this. The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone will save it. And this is an interesting thing, because Gemma and I run a podcast called Can Marketing Save the Planet? And of course, one of the things that we often joke about with our guests is, you know what, the planet's going to be fine. The planet is likely to just regenerate, but what about humanity? So maybe the greatest threat is that the belief is that who's going to come and save the humans? You know, this is the problem that we may have. And of course, we're living in very, very, very strange times. I mean, you know, these are just snippets and little gems that we can have a look at that, you know, if we're not aware of what's going on now with our climate and the crisis that we are experiencing, both locally and globally, then we must have been living under a rock, unless we are like Mr. Trump and we believe that climate change is just all this incredible hoax. I, for one, am with the scientists. So, of course, things are changing. We're starting to feel the changes. They're very real. The business landscape, the operating landscape that we all are within is also responding to those changes. Frank's just mentioned some of those things that we're starting to see. There are increasing regulations, scopes, disclosures that are required, carbon budgets, carbon taxes. All of these things are starting to build and shift. There's more reporting transparency required than ever before, and there are likely to just keep growing and increasing. Standardization of reporting. Frank mentioned that it's likely that we're going to be standardized reporting on sustainability, not just in the impact of our advertising, but generally, but of course, from the carbon emissions and the carbon impact that is coming there. And then, of course, there's regulations. We have our Green Claims Code in the UK, but there are various regulations around the world, and that is all increasing. And Gemma and Stephen will be talking about that later this afternoon. And so, of course, once the operating landscape starts to become affected, that cascades down to businesses, and businesses are starting to feel the pressures. Frank shared some statistics there about what consumers are expecting. And our books are filled with these kind of studies. And when we're talking to people on our podcast, often research houses, they're coming in and they're sharing these studies and information with us about just how sentiment is shifting. And so as marketers, as advertisers, we really need to be aware and educated about these shifts, because this is the landscape, these are the pressures that are mounting for our businesses. I mean, from an employee perspective, there is this aspect of organizations now being desirable because of their sustainability commitments, because of their carbon reduction commitments. There's even climate quitting, where people aren't happy with the organizations that they're working with because they don't feel they're doing enough. And so there becomes that disconnect between, I personally want to work for an organization that is doing better, and we're not. And so people are starting to vote with their feet. You know, they're moving and leaving these organizations. There's a whole load of studies around productivity, and indeed how organizations that have made those commitments to sustainability are not only attracting the best talent, but they're retaining talent. And the talent that is within those organizations is waking up every day excited to be part of those organizations. So their productivity levels are high. And therefore the cost of that disconnection, which is a very real cost to business, I think in the latest Gallup poll, in the US alone, it's $500 billion a year is accounted to lack of productivity In the UK, it's 200 billion pounds sterling. So we've got people coming into organisations that aren't committed, aren't feeling that they're aligned or on purpose. And sustainability and getting people on board and bringing them on with the story about how we're doing better and being more responsible is actually a kind of no-brainer win for why organisations can drive more profitability through not having to pay the cost of lack of productivity. And then, of course, the expectations of our consumers are shifting. We're expecting more. We're expecting organisations to be doing better. And as Frank shared some of those statistics again, you know, these are big numbers. These are growing in how important that these aspects are becoming for consumers. We're all I mean, think about your own behaviours. I mean, is anybody remotely concerned about the climate? Has that started to shift? You know, are you starting to make different choices about what you consume, where you consume, how you consume? I have, you know, totally pivoted. And so that's what we're all doing. You know, this isn't just exclusive to the odd few. And then, of course, from an investment perspective, climate risk is an investment risk. And that investment risk is driving, again, more regulation, more expectation, more pressure on businesses. And I want to pause here for a minute because I think it's really interesting to listen to Frank's opening address and maybe the first few slides of my address. And it's all about organisations and businesses and statistics and consumers. And I want to bring this right back to you. Because we're talking about action and we're talking about being at a summit that is talking about doing things differently and having the courage and confidence to not only be educated about what needs to shift or how things could shift, but actually taking action. And yes, collectively, that is really powerful, but it starts with one person making that decision, not sitting on their hands, speaking out, taking action, committing to themselves that I'm actually going to do something rather than rock up for a wonderful afternoon and then hear a load of stuff and do nothing. So I really, really want to bring it back to you because we're talking about the power of advertising for a better planet, but that starts with the people in advertising. That starts with every single individual who has a responsibility, who is making a decision daily. Am I going to continue to be part of the problem, or am I actually going to make some shifts and take some actions to be part of the solution, both on an individual level and a collective level? So I really want you to own that action from me, to think about this is about you. This is actually about what you're going to do. Many of you will be familiar with the work of purpose disruptors when we talk about advertised emissions. It's not as if we don't know that there is a challenge with regards to what we do as advertisers. You can see the 22 statistics there, up 11% from 2019, adding 32% to the carbon footprint of each individual in the UK. And I think it's worth reminding ourselves that our entire industry is built on the engine of perpetual growth. But on a planet with finite resources, infinite growth isn't possible. So where do opportunities exist and what does good growth look like? And I'm sure you're going to hear about some of those opportunities and what good growth looks like today, because I know you're going to be, I know Ollie's here from the GoodNet, and he's going to be talking about green media, and there are solutions. And we have had 109 guests so far on our podcast. We've got another 30 programs already lined up, ready into the middle of next year. And these conversations are always so enlightening and illuminating. And there is plenty to learn about how marketers. We've had conversations with the GoodNet, a couple of conversations. We've had Duncan Meisel from Clean Creatives talking about practical solutions. I believe the F-list, the latest list, came out yesterday. We've had brilliant team from Purpose Disruptors on there, and we've had Wim Vermeulen, the Director of Strategy and Sustainability at Bubka, and also the author of Speak Up Now, Marketing in the Times of a Climate Crisis. And I really liked the way in that conversation we had with Wim that he framed it that marketers are perfectly positioned to be accelerating the transition. And it's exactly where we need to be. But of course, we're not going to be anywhere if we don't take action. So again, my question to you is, what are you going to do? What actions are you going to take? So I've created a little acronym for you, and it's not surprisingly called ACTION. And I want you to think about what it is that you can do, because this is about my challenge to you. How are you going to take some action? So awareness and alternatives. Well, today's a good start, isn't it, to learn more about what's available to you, what more you could be doing. And I would say, as a marketer, as an advertiser, then stay committed to learning to what else you can do. Because if we think about what we do, we measure click-through rates and conversion metrics with absolute fanatical precision. But do we consistently measure carbon footprints with that same precision? Are we measuring digital campaigns that we create with that same precision from a carbon impact perspective? Every autoplay video, every programmatic auction, every data center call, these are real world energy costs. Frank showed that supply chain of what that looks like. Well, every single one is driving emissions. Are you aware? Are you aware of what's available, and are you aware of your starting point? And that brings me to the carbon awareness, carbon literacy awareness. And, you know, personally for me, one of the things I did is I became certified as carbon literate, because it was like, what is this carbon? Where does it sit? It's difficult to see. And so learning about carbon was a game changer for me. And I'm not necessarily advocating that you all need to go and become carbon literate, but I actually do think it's something that should be taught in schools, and all grown-ups and humans need to be aware of. But do you know the carbon impact of the programs, of the media plans that you have? Where is your number? Do you know your number? Are you tracking your numbers? Are you making commitments to how you then do things differently to reduce those numbers? And again, a good question is, what if your key performance indicators around numbers wasn't just around ROAS, you know, your return on ad spend, but also what about a return on the planet or a return on society? How would that change our strategies tomorrow? The next thing, and again, you're going to hear more about these platforms today, is the tech and the SaaS options. And there are many ongoing options that support marketers and advertisers around mainly transparency, around understanding the data, seeing your programs so that you can understand where you can reduce waste. We spoke to Sophie Collins, the CMO at MPB, and she was talking to us about all the things that they've been doing. And the critical piece was first understanding what their numbers looked like, then making the commitments and actually putting in the plans and the energy and the commitment to change those plans. So what are you doing about waste in your programs? Is that something that you are focused on? What is it that you're doing? How are you using the tech and the understanding to understand what that looks like for you? And I guess this leads to the I, which is be inquisitive around impact, publishers' impact, unviewable media, how you can resource this. I mean, we share lots of information about tactics and tips and things that advertisers, publishers, marketers can be doing to think about the reduction of their carbon impact, from file sizes, keeping them small. Shorter ads means smaller files equals lower carbon emissions. Any unseen digital impression is wastage, so avoid skippable video ads, prioritize platforms with better attention metrics, frequency cap video buys, etc., etc. So there's plenty of stuff that you can be doing. We make much of our advice and tactics and tips available through our books, through our podcasts, through the conversations that we're having. So it's not as if the information isn't out there and you're not readily, it's not readily accessible for things that you can be doing. And so the O is optimize for better. The reality is that much of digital display activity has relatively little effect due to banner blindness and the like, and the low impact nature of the medium, unless it's part of a much, much bigger campaign spend, means that visibility is hampered. So optimize for better. Constantly ask, where is the context here? How can we be optimizing performance of what it is that we are doing through our retargeting, through quality impressions, supporting in supportive editorial environments, etc. So as I said, there's plenty of advice, there's plenty you can be doing, but always seeking to do better. Am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution? And then last but by no means least, when Seth Godin came on our podcast, he really talked about that we really need to start getting rather uncomfortable, get out of our lanes, start saying no, there's a better way, have we tried this? You know, really start to think about the responsibility that you have as an individual to yourself, to your clients, to your teams, to your agencies, and indeed, one would say to humanity, because let's remember, we think the planet's going to be just fine. So my ask of you today is really to think about what it is that you can be doing, because at the end of the day, the climate crisis is the ultimate media brief. It requires the most powerful campaign ever conceived, not for a product, but for a future. And I would ask, what could that campaign look like if we all did something and we all collaborated together? So do things differently and think about what you can be doing. Because another constant theme that comes up on our podcast is there's a lot of talking, but there's not much doing. And so are we going to be all mouth and no talk, or all mouth and no action, all talk and no action? We definitely want to be thinking about the actions that we can be taking. So the book, thank you for mentioning our book, but this book, I've brought it onto the stage because it's got 101 practical ways that you can be considering how to optimize and improve what it is that you do as a marketer or advertiser. At the end of every one of those 101 chapters, there are 3 actions to consider. So that's 303 actions. Now, not all of them are going to be relevant for your role, but I would ask you, how many actions could you commit to? Even 1% of those actions would be pretty phenomenal if we all took action. So that is my mantra. You know, it's all got to be about the action. You can find more information about what we do, our books, our podcasts. Anybody tune into the podcast? Do we have any podcast fans in the room? Oh, I see a few hands, but please do have a listen. We keep them short and digestible, so do come on and have a look at the work that we do over at Can Marketing Save the Planet. There's a QR code there. You can scan it. You can find us on canmarketingsavetheplanet.com. And that just leaves me to say, have a brilliant day, learn lots, take action. Thank you.